this isn't your usual motor. It's the new Ford Focus RS, one of the most exciting cars Ford has ever produced. I'm going to dispense with the usual frippery and become something of a fanboy. You see, I've wanted to drive one of these things since they were first rumoured. The last two Focus RSs were absolutely stonking cars. Fun, fast and very affordable considering what they could do. After all, they were fast Fords, made by people who know a thing or two about making hatches go really, really fast. For example, the Cosworths. The Escort RS Cosworth was all kinds of awesome. Its predecessor, the Sierra, was punishingly quick for its time. In fact, the RS lineage goes all the way to the late 60s, with the 15M, 17M and 20M RS. RS stands for Rally Sport, which is exactly what the original RSs were intended for, going rallying. Nowadays, if you want to go dirt racing in a Ford, you're probably better off with a decently prepped Fiesta. However, RS doesn't really mean that anymore. Think of it like the M badge on the back of a BMW or an RS Audi, something like that. It's the most hardcore road car you can buy. They have a huge following as well. The name carries some considerable weight and people want it in their lives and on their drives. Usually men of a certain age, but still, their money is as good as anyone else's. This is the first Focus to come with an all-wheel drive system, but it's different from the usual all-wheel drive stuff you get. Now this one's a bit cleverer. It can shuffle up to 70% of its torque to a single rear wheel to keep you in check. It's got something called an RDU, a rear drive unit, and it's got clutch packs in it to basically put the power where you need it at any given time, like proper torque vectoring. It also means the car can change its character depending on which mode you're in. For example, in normal you're kept nice and safe with the ESC set to crayon and all light. Sport makes everything a bit angry and lets the exhaust sing a little more. Track is there for the circuit only and lets the car slip a little, but lets a good driver get a properly quick lap time. Usual stuff for a BMW or an Audi, but this is a Ford Focus, so the fact it's here means something pretty big. Then there's drift mode. That's the button you press when you want to drive like a complete and utter lunatic. So what you do is you press the button, you go into a corner, you give it a bit too much, and then the car shuffles the power to the wheel that's required to keep you drifting in the direction you want to drift. It takes a bit of practice, but once you've got it, it basically makes drifting one of the easiest things in the world ever. It's fantastic. Now drift mode works in a couple of ways. You can have it with a little bit of ESP so the car will look after you and it will realise when things are going wrong and keep you in check, or Ford are the only people that will allow you to turn all of the ESP systems off. That's when it gets a little bit trickier and you can fall off a bit. On top of all of that, there's adjustable ESC and dampers. Now its engine. It's a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder turbo with 345 horsepower and 325 pound-foot, 347 on overboost. 0 to 62 takes 4.7 seconds and it'll top out at 165 miles an hour. It's a hyper hatch, alright, quicker than a Golf R and well into RS3 territory, if not quite as fast. And to top it all off, it's got a fantastic 6-speed manual gearbox. This thing is set up to be a proper driver's car. The last two Focus RSs, as I said earlier, were fantastic cars. A little bit torque steery, a little bit manic. This doesn't have any of that. My God, it feels so planted. Driving it around the circuit, you could bung it into a corner, it would err on the side of understeer a little bit, but when you got it right, man, it would grip and grip and grip and grip and grip. You could cling onto corners at stupid speeds, even in the wet. Now the throttle response, oh man, the engine in this, it makes a hell of a racket. And the throttle, you can modulate it, you can work with it so well. Now going through all the driving modes and all that, you are only supposed to really use crayon mode on the road, but you can stick it into sport if you really want to. Drift mode is seriously a revelation. because of all the electromechanical trickery they've got going on, they figured out that with their all-wheel drive system, they could make drifting really easy. And why shouldn't they? It's a really fun thing to do. It makes me happy when I manage to pull it off, and I imagine it's going to make a lot of people very happy as well. But when you select it, there is a thing that says for track use only. Now, what are the percentage of people who, when they buy their shiny new Focus RS, are going to press the drift mode button at the first roundabout they see and go, I wonder what this does? I think there are going to be a fair few people binning these around roundabouts and in towns, doing some very silly things. And that's entirely their responsibility. Ford has warned you. I imagine the Daily Mail might get cross, but you know what? If the Daily Mail gets cross, they'll probably sell 10 million more of these. Now the handling, you can tell it's got an amazing chassis. The ride on a bumpy road, such as the one we're on now, well, it's not the best in the world, but this isn't a cosseting glove of a car, it's a hot hatch. Well, it's not a hot hatch, it's a hyper hatch. It is in the class with the RS3 and what have you. Now this is a good year for Ford, because in the UK at least, they've just released the Mustang, and now this. Now the Mustang is a very interesting car to compare it to, because it's big, it's a bit soft and squidgy, it feels great, and it's very tail happy and all that, especially if you get the V8. Whereas this is a far tauter car. This is way more of a driver's car. The Mustang's a fun thing. This is a really serious bit of kit. It's a proper all-rounder though, because you can still fit loads of stuff in the back. You know, it's got that Ford Focus practicality to it, and it's not that expensive. This one is about £33,000. That's not much money considering the amount of car you get for it. It looks the part as well. They've taken the Focus and made it really aggressive. It's a very angry looking thing, in black especially. And then you get up to it and it's got all the scoops and it's got the vents and all the lines and angriness about it. Now the big question is whether you should have one of these over, say, an Audi RS3 or a Golf R or an A45 AMG. I say drive them all first, but you know what, for me, I'd probably have the Ford. And if people turn their nose up saying, oh, it's Ford, when you beat them at the lights and then execute a perfect drift round a roundabout while giving them the finger, well, then you'll have the last laugh. Now, criticisms of it, I have very few. The interior's a bit dark, I suppose, and the plastics aren't, well, it's not an Audi interior, but it's also a lot cheaper than an Audi. Being a Focus, it does have the same sat-nav as all the other Focuses, and that is one of the most hateful systems I've ever used in my life. It is awful. In all, in some sort of vague conclusion, it handles brilliantly, the steering's fantastic, the turn of pace is immense, and what it can do, it'll make you look like a hero, it'll make you feel like a hero. This is one of the best hot hatches ever made. The hype train for the new Focus RS has been running at full steam for a while, and thankfully it's as good as we'd hoped it would be. Actually, it's better. The benchmark for the hot hatch is pretty high nowadays. Well, the RS3, the A45 AMG, and even the Golf R, and that's really what the Focus RS is up against. And you know what? For the money, for what it does and just how well it does it, the Focus is definitely one to watch.